Welcome to my channel Coding Clean, and today we're going to look at functions in C++. So let's begin our introduction. What is a function? Consider a function to be this box. We don't know what is inside the box, and we want to understand the basic concept of a function in C++. So let's begin that a function is a block of code, and that block of code accepts some input. And based on the input, this function, this block of code, produces some sort of output. Now let's ask a question that what type of input does it take? And then what type of output does it produce? And let's say that the function takes two integers and then it produces a single integer value. Okay, that's fine. So we have a block of code that we call a function, and it takes input, and the input is two integer values, and it produces another integer value, a single integer value. And then we say, okay, what are these integers called in the context of a function? We call them parameters of the function. So what is the output value called? And it's called a return type. What is the name of this function? And we say, let's call it sum. From the name of the function, we know that what is going to be inside this function. Because if it takes two integers, as we saw before, and it produces a single integer, and the sum means addition of two integers, so this function must be adding those integers together. Put the brackets, it's the block of code. And in C++, if we transform that diagram into the syntax, then it's going to be the first value when defining a function is going to be the return type, the type of the output value, and then the function name, and then within these parentheses, the list of parameters. In our case of the box, there were two integers. And let's now put those specific data types. So for the return type, the function sum was returning an integer value, and the name of the function was sum, and the inputs that we called parameters were two integer values. And this is the basic syntax of defining a function. So the representation of that box is exactly this thing in C++. So let's write code and explain what this all means. So I have opened dev C++ IDE. I'm going to define a function, and remember that a function can be defined outside the body of any other function. You cannot define one function inside another function. So I'm going to create a function. The return type of the function is going to be int, and it means that this function is going to produce an integer value. As a result, the name of the function is the second thing. We type the name of the function, then the parentheses, and of course, int a, int b. We need to declare two variables. The parameters are basically two local variables which are input to the function. And then the body of the function, and inside the body, we type the return statement. Always remember, if the return type of your function is int or float or string or character, any particular data type, but not the keyword void, you must type the return statement. You must return a value. It's a good programming practice, and that's what the return statement does. It returns a value. I'm going to return the addition of these two parameters. And where do we return this value? From where the function is called. Because we have defined a function, but we are not using it in our program. In order to use a function in your program, you must call it. And the syntax for calling a function is as follows. You type the name of the function, then these parentheses, and the function expects two integer values. We have to pass two integer values only. So I'm going to pass 20 and 30. And then you have to put a semicolon. This line is called invoking a function or calling a function. So invoking or sometimes we use calling a function. And by calling a function, we means take these two integer values, and the first integer value, this 20, will be stored in A when we call it, and 30, the second integer value, will be stored in B. And those values will be added together and will be returned back from where the function was called. So in place of this statement, we will get the result of A plus B once the function call is finished. And then we are going to display the value on screen, whatever value is returned by the function. So if I save changes, compile the code and execute, we see the value 50. Always remember that these value and its type must match the value types, the parameter types of the function. If the function expects two integers, we have to pass two integers. If the function expects, for example, floats, we have to pass floating values. These values that we call or pass during the calling of function is called arguments. And here, these are called parameters. So don't confuse these two terms with one another. At the time of calling a function, the values that you pass to the function are called arguments. And at the time of defining a function, we are called them parameters. And the values of the arguments are stored in the same order in the local parameters. So that's it about the function. What if a function does not return a value, but rather we pass some values to the function performs some calculation, and then just output the value instead of returning it back? For such function, we change the type, the return type, to void. The keyword void means that this function does not return a value. So I am going to just simply say, do not return the value, but rather display the addition of A plus B on screen. And then we don't have to see out again because the function itself is doing the output job. I'm going to save it, recompile the code, and then execute the program. And this time we're going to see exactly the same result, but this function does not return a value. And how do we know, and how does the compiler know, is that we put void keyword in place of int and float and string. So if you say void, this function should not return a value. So if you have any questions, leave your questions in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Happy coding.